I'm Luke Pearson. I do internal CSIRT incident response things for a global organisation that the legal team has told me I'm not allowed to name. For anybody else who has done this kind of work, it means 90% of your time is doing preparation and boringness and waiting for exciting things to happen. Because if your incident response team is busy 100% of the time, your business probably isn't going to make it very far. So I was in the 90% of the time. I'd just loaded up Top Gun. I was ready for a very exciting afternoon. And my boss wandered past and he saw me watching a movie. And he said to me, "What are you doing?" I paused the movie because obviously I didn't want to miss anything. And I said to him, "I'm doing research. Obviously, our SOC team, they need better processes for how to look at new information and reach decent conclusions. It's work related, I promise. And that's why I have a talk now." So a little disclaimer, I've worked with a bunch of people and all of the case studies that you're going to see today are totally, completely made up, including the talk that I just gave to my bosses in the audience. That was a complete fabrication. I planned this from the beginning. So I want you to put yourself in the position of a SOC. You are sitting as a SOC analyst and a new alert has come into the queue, right? We see a port scan has taken place. We can see the time that it took place. The raw message says something about Nmap and ICMP. We see it's coming from some form of external IP address and it's going to an internal IP address. So something on the internet is scanning something inside a network. You're a SOC analyst, this is all the information you have. By show of hands, how many people think, this is nothing, we can close this. This does not matter to my organization, I can move on to the next alert. See a couple of hands sort of going like this, okay. Who wants to go the other way? This is an incident. Something terrible has taken place. We need to get CSIRT or Tier 2 or however your organisation works involved and we need to do incident response right now. See a couple of waivers there as well. Okay, we're going to work through this. What I want you to do is I want you to have a think about how you reached that conclusion. And for the vast majority of you, I got you to fall asleep by slide 4. That's a new personal record for me. So, if you take an experienced staff member and you put them into the SOC and you have them look at an alert like we just looked at, they'll reach a conclusion pretty quick. They'll say, no, that's fine, we don't have to worry about that, it's just another port scan, close the case. Or, yep, that's bad, escalate it straight away. The problem with these teams is that experienced professionals, is that if you ask them how they reach that conclusion, they go, I looked at the alert and it just made sense. You know, I applied my experience to it, I followed my gut, and I've reached my conclusion. What you can't do is take your brand new hire, fresh out of uni or whoever it happens to be, put them into a SOC and then have your Tier 3 person train them on just follow your gut, because it doesn't work for new people. It takes time to develop that gut. So what we're trying to address here today is give your new people and maybe even your experienced people a bit of a framework that they can work through. What I find happens with a lot of new hires is you get the image on the right for a port scan. They dive into everything. They dive into their SOC dashboards, they dive into their EDR, they dive into the SIEM, they ask a bunch of people what's going on, and they understand the entire organization for a single port scan, which is a less complex sort of event. And then having your SOC person make a decision is really, really hard and scary, right? They have to own that decision. If they say it's nothing, and it turns out to be a big thing, then they're worried about getting in trouble for that. And the reverse is true too. They don't want to waste all of CSIRT's time on nothing burgers when there could be other things that CSIRT could be working on, like watching Top Gun. Okay, so into the OODA loop. The OODA loop was first envisaged in 1976, I think, by Colonel John Boyd of the US Air Force. So the way that this was designed, or the people that this was designed to be targeted towards, is fighter pilots. And fighter pilots need to make really, really quick decisions in the heat of combat, right? They need to know, am I pulling the trigger, am I engaging, am I doing other piloty-based things that I don't fully understand? And then, like all good things in the military, they took a very tactical process and procedure and they expanded it out so it could be used strategically as well. And then, I'm sure you've never heard of this happening in cybersecurity or anywhere else, we took military terminology and processes and we stole it in the private sector. So law enforcement have taken it and used it to great effect. Lawyers and litigation teams have used this really effectively as well, because it's the same kind of thing. The opposition is doing something that you need to react to. In our case, hackers are doing something that we need to react to. We need to react to it really, really quickly and really, really effectively. So let's see how it was designed to work. And see, Top Gun reference. We make our observation. So the first O in OODA is observe. And this is really, really quick in fighter pilot space. We make an observation. There they are. This is Hollywood making our observation and starting off our OODA loop. Then we move into orientation. So we know where the bad guy is, or we've made some form of observation of something taking place. Let's now work out how does that fit into us? Where are we in relation to them? All of that kind of stuff. Where is the Earth? Where is the sun? Where is the clouds? All of the fighter pilot-y stuff. So Maverick here says they are 3 miles away, they are left, they're at our 10 o'clock position. He notes that the wings are level, which are all just pure observations, okay? Radar and what have you have worked out distance and all that kind of magic. But he also applies his own expertise to this, okay? He doesn't think, based on the fact that they're 3 miles away, the wings are level, they're not doing anything crazy, that the enemy has seen Maverick and Hollywood yet. Then they make a decision. Based on all of the information they've gathered really quickly. If you watch this in the movie, it's about a 10-second scene. They decide to make a continued left turn. We're going to try and get in behind the bad guys. We're going to sick them. And then after that, you act. Acting is really, really easy. You just do the thing that you've decided to do. So let's have another look at our alert, and let's put it into the context of OODA. So we make our observation, and within the SOC world, or the cyber incident response world, where I'm teaching people how to use this, I like to lock observation just to the thing that you see. So the alert that comes in, the Slack message you get, the whatever it happens to be that makes you go, I need to review this case. You lock it to that single pane of glass. As soon as you open a browser, open a different Slack tab or whatever it happens to be, you have moved out of observation. So we see that the port scan took place, we can see the time that it took, we can see the time that it finished, we can see which firewall this port scan took place against or through. It was an nmap ping sweep scan. Sorry, that's really tough to say. We can see the direction is inbound, so from the internet to our internal organization. We can see that the firewall did not kill the ping scan, so the packets were allowed to go backwards and forwards. IP source, IP destination. That's it. We have a start of context, we've made an observation, something has happened in our environment. If it's an attacker, there they are. Then we move on to orientation. So orientation is, let's get some more situational understanding. Let's work out a little bit more what's going on. In the SOC world, I like to sort of stop our orientation phase at 5 minutes, or cap it at 5 minutes. If you spend more than 5 minutes on orientation, you're sort of now doing investigation without deciding to do investigation, or come up to decision in a sec, and you're sort of falling down the rabbit hole, as it were. So we look at the source IP address, and it is some organization in Japan. I don't know who that is. So we Google a little bit further, and we can see that it is an ISP in Japan, possibly residential, possibly business, we're not sure. Wikipedia didn't tell me. But I'm capped to 5 minutes, so that's enough context for me to understand where the source of the traffic was, Japan, and start moving on. Now, this might be completely expected from Japan. Maybe my business has a presence in Japan, and this could be a pen test or whatever. But I'm not making my decision yet. I'm going to keep orienting on the other information that's available. The next thing I want to know is, what firewall was that, right? Most organizations aren't going to have one firewall, they're going to have a bunch. If it's a port scan against the external firewall, it's a very different risk profile to a port scan against an internal firewall. So, which one is it that helps me make my decision? The third thing we have here is, has this taken place before? I search for the IP address or something, the text from the alert in my case management system. Has this happened before? How was it handled those times? Right? Because if someone smarter than me has figured it out, I'm going to do what they did, if it's all identical. And then I search the easy places to search, right? So in this case, I'm searching Slack for the IP address, and maybe some security weirdo has said, we're doing a pen test or whatever it happens to be this week. This is what I want you to do with the ticket. And this is easy. This takes decision out of the picture. So let's pretend that that didn't happen. Now, all of those activities are orientation because I've moved away from the initial alert. I've looked at Google, I've looked at Whois, I've looked at internal network diagrams and internal chat applications, but I've achieved all of this in less than that 5 minute window, okay? Then I need to make a decision. Now, in general, I'm not a fan of flowcharting everything out because it discourages thinking, and I really like to encourage critical thinking from tier 1 all the way through my security teams. That said, when you come into this kind of work, it is nice to have an idea of where you're going to sort of inform your decision as you're moving through Observe and Orient. So for a SOC, I like to give them 3 options. Are we going to escalate this to the next tier because I think it's scary and it needs more action than I can give it? Am I going to close it as a non-issue? I don't care about this thing, it's a port scan against the external firewall, or the security weirdo has told me exactly what to do with this case, so that's what I'm going to do with it. Or am I going to investigate it further? Do I have scope within the organization to do that additional investigation? Now, if I want to investigate further, I might give myself an hour to do it, or I might have my analysts give themselves an hour to do it. I'm not going to say just go nuts and fall down the rabbit hole, because it can take days to climb back out. If you're doing this for an incident, because all of this thought workflow works for incident response as well, and maybe you're looking at a log and you saw this taking place, your decisions are really easy. Either I include this as a finding and tell the rest of my incident response team, hey, I found a new thing, we should pivot on this thing as well, or you don't include it as a new finding. Very easy. So we make our decision, and then we do it. Very, very simple. Hopefully you've got some nice documented processes for if you're implementing an IP block list or whatever it happens to be. All of your tier 1 analysts know how to do it and know how to do it in a repeatable fashion. So a bunch of mistakes that we see here. In your observation phase, looking at it and going, oh, it's a ping sweep or it's a port scan against the external firewall. I've seen this 1,000 times before. I'm not going to bother reading anything else. I'm just going to do it. Going the other way, deep diving down, all of that kind of stuff. For your orientation, I could look at that IP address and just assume it was part of our organization. Maybe we have a business presence in Japan and go, oh, it's part of them. I'm not going to worry about it. Confusing internal IP addresses and external IP addresses and things like that are really, really common mistakes as well. For your decision, especially with your more junior staff, not being able to make a decision is a really big hang-up for a lot of these people. Because they're scared of getting things wrong, they're scared of wasting people's time, and they're scared of missing the big scary attack that comes in. And then finally, moving on to acting. Not acting is a big mistake. I look at this alert, I work out what I need to do, but it's hard, or I need to wait for someone else, or I'm not fully confident in my analysis, so I'm going to ask someone else for help. Whereas implementing a block list or containing a host or whatever it is that is appropriate for that, the sooner you do that, the sooner you're potentially preventing this attack from progressing. Also, please make sure you're documenting everything that you do, even in tier 1, because if in 6 months' time that IP address is found to be bad and you come back to it and you've documented how you reached the decision that you made through your OODA, you've documented the IP address, you've documented that the security weirdo said to whitelist it or to escalate to them and close it out, it covers yourself as well. So we're going to jump into a different example here. How readable is that? Somewhat readable. Okay, so this is a CrowdStrike alert. This alert says that the workstation lpearson-ltm has downloaded a file, and this file, CrowdStrike's machine learning says is terrible. It's packed, it's got lots and lots of entropy, it looks like malware, it's high severity or high confidence. High severity, we're pretty sure this is bad, you should do something about it, contain this host or whatever it happens to be. But if we orient a little bit further, what we see, if we learn how to use our clicker, what we see is that the name of the file that has been triggered on, it lives in Luke Pearson's downloads directory, and it's a file called signedcontracts.zip. So if we orient on this, we might look up Luke Pearson, and we might find out that he belongs to the sales organization, in which case it is absolutely expected that he is going to receive a zip file of signed contracts, and it is reasonable to expect that those contracts are encrypted because sometimes salespeople believe in security. Believe it or not, it does happen. So, by show of hands, we've observed, we've oriented, we need to make our decision. How many people think incident? Cool, I see some hands. How many people think Nothing burger. I see more hands. How many people think we need to investigate further? I see a lot more hands. That's fair. What we probably want to do here is grab a copy of the signed contracts.zip, see what its contents are, or reach out to the user and see if this was expected and if they've opened it up and what they've done and things like that. Cool. Second alert. This one's interesting. We have DNS. We have DNS over TCP. For anyone who's not technical, DNS usually takes place over UDP. Destination port is 53, aligns with DNS, which is cool. Source port is a random high port, which is completely expected. And we're making this DNS request out to some Chinese organization, or an IP address that belongs to a Chinese organization. We have an event timestamp, which we can't understand at the moment, unless you can do epoch in your head, which more power to you. We have the IP destination that we're heading to. We have the number of bytes that were sent, but we don't have a duration. Yes, we do. We have a duration of about 3 minutes, just over 3 minutes. This connection lived for just over 3 minutes, and we have an internal IP address. That's our observation. Something took place. Now we orient, okay? So, sorry, I oriented during the observation phase. We look up the IP address and we find out that it's in China. We look at our duration and we find out that 186 seconds is 3 minutes. If you can't do that in your head, that's what calculators are for, hooray. Speaking of calculators though, our bytes sent is a really big number. If you pull that out and throw it into calculator or Google, you're going to find out that that is 18 exabytes of data, which is a lot of data, over 3 minutes. Let's just say the IP source here, because we're going to observe fully. The IP source is a DNS server within our organization. So we expect it to make DNS requests. But that's a lot of data. Okay, that's about all the orientation that we can do. We don't have a listed domain. We don't have any way to easily find it. We remember 5-minute window. It's going to take longer than that. You're no longer orienting. You are investigating. So, who thinks incident? I see a few more hands coming up. Okay. Who thinks nothing burger? I see a hand. Excellent. Who thinks we need to investigate further? A lot of hands. Okay. What actually happened in this? So let's look at the laws of physics, right? Our server probably does not contain 18 exabytes of data. Probably. Some organizations have that, and more power to you. But our organization doesn't. Our server probably has a 1 gig or a 10 gig Ethernet link, right? So 10 gigs a second. 18 exabytes cannot physically leave this server over 3 minutes. Impossible. I'm going to say it. I don't usually use concrete words like that. I say not likely. But in this case, impossible. Could not have happened. So what we are probably looking at here is a bug. Some form of error in our reporting. And that's what this was. For anybody that's really, really interested, what we see here is a buffer overflow, basically, in the report. It took a bunch of TCP connections, munched them together, somehow found a -1, and rolled back to the biggest integer it could possibly find. And if more data than 1 gig per second leaves our servers, we call it data exfiltration. So that's what happened here. Okay. One more example. You are looking at a server as part of incident response. You find, it's a Mac, so you find a launch agent file, or plist file, that is set to run this whenever a particular user logs in. We're observing that that's part of our observation, because it's part of the alert, which is not captured on screen, because I got lazy. And it's running SSH, it's using a couple of flags that we don't understand, and it's effectively setting up a reverse shell to a server on the internet, starting with the 34220 IP address. So it looks a little bit sus. We orient a bit further. We find that that IP address belongs to an Amazon EC2 instance. And we find that this user is not a developer. He's a sales user again. So he's not doing any local testing and port forwarding or anything like that you would expect. That's really about all we can find for that. Maybe we could grab a copy of the ID RSA and see what's in it. Maybe we could reach out to the user and go, did you set this up? There's a bunch of things that we could do, but they lean into investigation because they take longer than 5 minutes. So, incident. Lots of hands. Excellent. Not incident. I don't think I see a single hand. Fantastic. Investigate further. Few people want to dig in, see if we can explain that activity. Yep. In this case, sorry, I forgot that I put this slide in this morning. So for orientation, we're getting out of our alert and we don't understand what some of these flags do. If you're ever in this situation for any Linux command line based tool, the explainshell.com website is absolutely fantastic. You take any command, you punch it in there, and it tells you exactly what the flags do. And that's how we figured out that a reverse shell was taking place. In this case, yes, this was a very bad day for an organization. An attacker was setting up persistence. What they're effectively doing here is setting up a second SSH listener on port 2030 so that they can connect to that from the 34220 address and tunnel all their stuff through and do all sorts of terrible, terrible mischief on port 2030. And that's all I have.
I am a super genius.